right, now we move on to section 2. The true situation of the papacy. Overview of the true position. Cardinal Giuseppe Siri was elected Pope in 1958 and chose the name Gregory the 17th. Okay? He was then threatened with death and perhaps even the bombing of the Vatican by infiltrators and outside forces, Freemasons, communists, etc. They intimidated him into either resigning from the papacy or not making it publicly known that he was elected. He was then replaced by anti-Pope John the 23rd, who the world was deceived into believing was the true and validly elected Pope. Pope Gregory the 17th was forced by these dark forces to act contrary to his will and was more or less imprisoned under surveillance at his episcopal palace in Genoa, where he had been archbishop before he became pope. In 1988, a Vietnamese priest named Quoc Tran, or Quoc Tran, had a hunch that Giuseppe Siri was actually the true pope, as did many other people. He approached Siri and inquired as to if this was the case. Siri admitted that he was the pope, and Quoc Tran tried to convince him to flee with him to America. Father Quoc said, "Come with me right now. I have 2 tickets to go to America where there are people who will help you." Pope Gregory the 17th replied, "That would be impossible. I cannot go. They can kill me at any time." This is from the popeinred.com, meeting on June 14th, 1988 AD. Quoc Tran secretly helped him to elevate cardinals, appoint a Camerlengo, and to formulate a continuation of the papacy plan. A year later, on May 2nd, 1989, the Pope was dead. It is believed from poisoning. In 1990, a conclave was announced by his Camerlengo, and it was held secretly in Rome in 1991. A new pope was elected on May 3rd, 1991, who took the name Gregory the 18th, and he is the pope right now. The pope and his very small number of clerics are currently hidden away from the world, just as Henry Edward Cardinal Manning said would happen near the end of the world during the apostasy of Rome. Today, the Catholic Church is extremely small, and along with the true pope, is eclipsed by the anti-popes in Rome, the blasphemous Novus Ordo cult of Satan, and countless other schismatics and heretics. Now, I have drafted or crafted here a diagram to visually help you to visualize our situation right now. Okay? So here we see Our Lady of La Salette crying, saying the church, this is an image of Our Lady of La Salette, but the quote is from Melanie of La Salette, the little girl, right? She said, "The church will be eclipsed. At first, we will not know which is the true pope." So notice here, Melanie of La Salette, and we're going to cover this more in the prophecy section. Melanie of La Salette, something you'll notice is that Sedevacantists are like always quoting Our Lady of La Salette and giving their interpretations of it and stuff like that. But what do they never do? At least I've never seen them do it. They have never shown the interpretations of La Salette given by the very children who were there. And what do the children say? What does Melanie say? She doesn't say there will be no pope, like Sedevacantists think. She doesn't say, for 60 years or more, there will be no pope. She doesn't say any of that. But Our Lady of La Salette and Melanie, they speak about the pope Okay, there being a pope during this crisis. Our Lady says the pope, the Holy Father, will have much to suffer. The pope can't suffer if there's no pope. Okay, there is a pope suffering right now, as Our Lady of Vlasolet said. So Melanie of Vlasolet says here, the church will be eclipsed. At first, we will not know which is the true pope. Okay, meaning there is a true pope, but at first you won't know who the true pope is. Okay, so this is the diagram here. At the very top layer, we have the Novus Ordo, right? That's the biggest, most publicly accepted group that claims to be the Catholic Church. Okay, then we go a layer below that. We have quote unquote traditional Novus Ordo heretics, who are like, the ones who I think like Taylor Marshall would probably fall into this category. Those consider themselves to be like, more like conservative and that kind of stuff. Like they basically try to have their feet in both ponds. They're in the Novus Ordo, which is a bunch of liberal blasphemy and heresy. But at the same time, they try to like act as if they are still traditional and holding to the true interpretation of the church's teaching or whatever. So they're trying to serve two masters, right? That would be like the people who are like quote unquote traditional Novus Ordo heretics are more like quote unquote conservative Novus Ordo heretics, right? Then you have the SSPX heretics, which will be like Marcel Lefebvre and his group, those who follow him, that kind of stuff. They, of course, they believe in indifferentism. They believe like salvation for pagans through invincible ignorance and all that kind of blasphemy, okay? Then you go a layer below that, you have indifferentist sedevacantist heretics, which would be like, Donald Sanborn, I think he's, I think they call it a sedepravationist. There are all these sort of different terms, but, they're still called sedevacantists oftentimes. So let's just see the sedevacantist, right? That would be like Donald Sanborn, right? Believing basically the same garbage as SSPX, where like they think that pagans can be saved without converting and all this kind of nonsense and that kind of stuff, right? But they're sedevacantists. They think like the anti-popes are not real popes, but they themselves still believe a bunch of heresy, right? Then a layer below that, you have Feniite sedevacantist heretics, which would be like Diamond Brothers. There is a heretic called, quote unquote, Bishop Gabriel Tethero. We're going to cover all these people in the later sections, okay? So Feniite sedevacantist heretic, right? Because as far as I've seen, the indifferentist sedevacantist heretics are kind of like the, I guess you could say, mainstream sedevacantists, right? They're considered like the more credible or more legitimate sedevacantists. And then the Feniite sedevacantists are considered to be these like kind of like, radical, fringe offshoot kind of people who are like outside of the mainstream sedevacantist kind of world, I guess, right? So a layer below the indifferentist sedevacantists, you have the Feniite sedevacantists. Then a layer below that, you have the quote unquote traditional anti-popes. That would be like the conclavist anti-popes. Like, I think his name was his name David Bowden, or was it Michael Bowden? One of the two, but that guy, we're going to cover that later as well. And then there, of course, you have the, the Palmarian anti-popes. You have the quote unquote apostles of infinite love anti-popes. Okay, so those are like the, quote unquote traditional anti-popes. Okay, so people who are like, they reject the Novus Ordo, anti-popes, or at least most of them, because I think the Palmarians believe that John the 23rd was a real pope or something like that. We'll cover, God willing, we'll cover those things later. Okay, but those are the traditional, quote unquote traditional anti-popes. Okay, they claim to be the true pope, and they claim that they are the legitimate Catholic Church with the legitimate Catholic Pope, opposing the Novus Ordo false Pope and all this kind of stuff. Then a layer below them, you have Syri-only schismatics. And this would be people who like, I think Gary Jouffre, right? People like Gary Jouffre and the quote unquote St. Jude's Shrine. They believe that Cardinal Giuseppe Siri was the Pope, which is accurate, but then they reject Gregory the 18th. Right, they believe Gregory XVIII is not the real Pope and that kind of stuff, or they believe Gregory XVIII doesn't exist and all this kind of stuff, right? So they would be, I would call them Syri-only schismatics. They accept Gregory XVII, but reject Gregory XVIII. Okay, then a layer below them, you finally get to the real church, which is the small amount of Catholics who are with the real Pope Gregory XVIII. Okay, so you see here, You have all these layers of heretics and schismatics all claiming to be the real church. And the real church, the actual real Catholic Church, is this tiny little group at the bottom of this diagram here. Okay? So this is our situation right now. These are the layers of heretics eclipsing the true church, hiding the true church from people's view. Okay? When people research traditional Catholic and that kind of stuff, they're probably going to find these heretics and stuff before they find the real church. You see? So this is our situation. So I hope that diagram helps to formulate in your mind a clearer understanding of our situation.